So welcome to the Node.js Node API team meeting for June 20th, 2025. We'll take our standard approach of going through the board and looking at all the issues there. Has anybody got any announcements they'd like to make before we do that? No, okay. I'm sharing the board. Hopefully I shared the right window. Move that one out. Okay. So let's start with what's in done. So I think we already talked about the first one.
I think the new item in the down column is the anti-experimental warning.
Right,
It
this
was
one. Okay.
landed. Yeah,
So that this one is landed.
yeah,
Okay. No, that's great. So that will be that'll come through in the next major, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And Miguel, thanks for working on that.
No problem. It was a good one to start.
Great. Okay, we can move over. I don't think there's anything new on the has PR side of things.
I have a PR about those then and catch methods on the.
Okay.
Maybe we can.
Does that show up here? This
Add.
one, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to move that into has PR, and then we can
Okay.
go if you have things we should discuss on it.
Yeah, Ching Sun Han already did some reviewing there.
Okay.
Thanks for that. I just the CI was failing, and I just pushed some changes related to that. So maybe we can retrigger and see. Um, but yeah, be free to also do a review.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Let's see.
Oh,
These are all queued, I think. So yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I just checked this. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely thanks
So,
for working on
yeah.
that. That was pretty fast.
Yeah, I was. uh, I don't know. I was excited to do something. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it looks great, and I think it's a really nice patch to do. Thank
Cool.
you for the work.
Yeah. No problem. Just one thing that I was thinking because now adding those methods, do you think that other task related to updating the docs with the other approach of doing the get method on the Denon because I am like already improving the documentation, but with the add of the methods, but we had another task related to uh, improve the docs with the old usage, right?
Do you have an example?
We have an example on that issue that Razer this PR that you did it um, about because I remember the folk there was trying to do like a then catch with the both methods and you suggested to do with the unfulfilled and the unrejected in the then. Can you go on the main task? Because this
So it's
issue,
not this one, right?
yes, it's the
It's the
parent one.
parent issue. So how do I get to the parent from
I
there? Is
think
that this
it's
one?
like
No.
I think
1666.
Right, there we go. Okay, right. Yep.
Yeah, that's it. Do you think this task it's still makes sense?
um I think it should be mentioning that the return value of a promise then should not be discarded. Otherwise, that promise will be a dangling promise.
Okay.
But I guess
So
I think if I understand Miguel's question, it's like, given that he's got a PR to add in the new methods, and that's going to be the easier way to do it, is it always also still useful to say, here's how you could do it with an older version of Node API that doesn't have these methods? Like, is that still a useful thing? I think is the question as I understand.
yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Y- y- Yeah, I think it kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, there
Okay.
might be some reason why like somebody can't update to the latest, the very latest. And so it doesn't hurt to have, yeah, in my opinion, doesn't hurt to have a little extra documentation that starts out with like, although you with the latest versions you can do it this way, which is great. Here's how you might not be able to upgrade, so here's the other ways, right?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can do that as well.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. So yeah, anything else you want to chat about on that one?
No, that was it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Anything there then in this one? Let's see.
I think it has been approved by multiple people, but there's a CI failure that's relevant to the change.
Right.
And the person who opened this pull request thinks that it might be better to go through the URL specification about um, Windows path. Windows path contains the single letter driver letter might be able to be passed as a URL, even though it should not be. So
Okay.
they would like to go through the cycle to see if this should be fixed in URL library instead of here. So we should wait for that discussion to come out.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Thanks for that update. Yeah, it's like you could surprisingly be able to do it, but maybe that's a bug somewhere else. So yeah, okay, makes a lot of sense to see if we should fix it there first.
Yeah.
Okay, this one I spent some time looking at, and I ended up tracing it back to the difference between like, so this one for context is like if you build an add-on, and they seem to actually like having I didn't see that immediately, but like they're building without actually using any version of Node itself. They build the add-on using our separate headers. And the key thing they've said is like, hey, we built it on CentOS and it runs with 20, like Node 20 across the different Linux platforms. But if I try with 22, it doesn't work. And it's like, okay. So I started off by looking like, first of all, I didn't quite realize that they weren't like doing it with a Node version. So I said, well, like, is there anything different in any of our headers or anything? But no, they're using a fixed version of the headers and they're setting a fixed version of Node API. So like nothing that changed in Node API is related to the issue. What I did discover though is that between 20 and 22, we started using std regex in Node itself. And that seems to be the change, because if I like remove the use of std regex in Node in 22, then the add-on runs fine. If I add it back in, it doesn't work. So it's related to a particular commit where we added this task runner and it uses regex. And like that was introduced in 22.2.0, that fails. 22.1.0 that doesn't have it passes, and I actually just commented out the use of the regex. So it's really related to the regex being used in Node. What I'm not sure is like why that should have any impact on the add-on working or not. What I'm thinking is like somehow Like it's something I even managed to link it statically, so it doesn't seem to be like because we're using shared versions of the stdlib++, that doesn't seem to make any difference either. So it seems to be like some incompatibility between using the regex having been built on one version of or one Linux and using the regex having been built on CentOS, and like somehow maybe when you use it the first time having been built one way, it does a certain set of initialization, and then like that doesn't match with what you get in your add-on. Like maybe it's inline code that's pulled in, like so it's not something that's in the dynamic link part. It's like something in the code that's statically pulled in that's incompatible. But that's how far I got. It's like, okay, it's nothing to do with, as far as I can tell, Node add-on API or anything that was changed. It's just that Node now uses the regex. And I might do a little bit more interest in like research. I think I found a couple things kind of saying like there's some problems with regex, but I need some more work to like quantify that. But I think that's where I'm at. And one other thing I might look at is like, can we hide those symbols? I did try to like start to remove some of the symbols. But I never managed to get it to work by removing symbols from the Node API or from the Node binary. But there was a ton of them, so I didn't remove them all. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts in terms of like what might cause that or what might be related that would be things to look at.
I'm just wondering that what should we respond to this? Like, we might be able to fix it, but it seems like it's not a supported workflow.
I guess
Or like, should we support it?
like it's interest, like it's important in the sense of, hey, I want to build my add-on once and I want it to run with a bunch of different versions of Node, right? And until now, they built once, totally unrelated to Node. They used our headers and it just ran on all the different versions. Now, so it seems very specific to regex, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I'm hoping that like maybe it's just something like, the implementation of regex. I don't know, like over the different versions that like I was thinking like some static part that's pulled in isn't compatible, and like so we may not be able to fix that, but like at least understanding it versus a general, hey, 22 just doesn't let you run things that you compiled on earlier versions from the ABI stability version kind of is good to understand.
I think it's the issue is not about compiling Node add-on, not API add-on with a different Node version. I think it's that they are building the add-on with different distribution of Linux, and that might lead to using different version of the standard library. So I'm wondering that does the API stability guarantee include different versions of standard libraries? Like,
The thing is it doesn't look like it's so I've got that info a little bit earlier on in that like for Node, we have like we say, let's see, like generally, so for Node itself, what we do is we build on a particular glibc version, and then we use the developer tool set to like use later versions of the compilers, but make sure we don't need a newer version of the glibc. However, we then like are like, well, Node should, and our experience has been, well, then Node just runs on any later glibcs. And from what it looks like they're building on 2.17, so we would expect that to just work on 2.2.8, which is what 20 and 22 require. And in fact, there's no difference that on that front between 20 and 22. So like there's not a clear, hey, you compiled on a newer one and it didn't work on like if they compiled on 2. 2.28, but we're trying to use 2.17, then I would be like, no, that doesn't work, right? Like, but this is a case where it should work. Otherwise, and because if you think of the add-on authors, they want to build one binary which can run across the different Linuxes, right? And I do agree, like we can't promise that that's always going to work, but it has been working okay. So that's why it's kind of like interesting to see. I still agree that like I don't know what we can say about this one. And like I'm
Yeah.
not sure whether like maybe we should suggest is like, well, these add-ons you're building, they're not going to be able to run like if you build with 22, node 22, then we haven't really ever said that that will let you run that add-on with an older version of Node. So like maybe it's reasonable to say, well, can you try building on, something that is like rel 8 instead of rel 7, because that's what we build 22 on, and that's what has the glibc minimum, and like then you have a different like maybe it's a bug in the developer tool set that on rel 7 versus rel 8, and but I hadn't quite thought through like is it actually reasonable to say like, well, okay, if you're going to build with 22, you're going to have to move up on your OS, or does that somehow break the hey, build once, run everywhere, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like we different Node.js versions requires different version of tool chains, and that could also impact the API. Even though it's not part of Node API itself, it might be other like standard library that you might use. So yeah, I think it might make sense to fix if we have a solution to that.
Yeah, if there was a way to say like let's hide the regex symbols that leak, like if it's related to the fact that the symbols are exposed and we could fix that, maybe. I have my bigger worry is it's something like the initialization is just not like somehow whatever happens when you use regex, having built it and used it in Node, that initialization is incompatible with what's expected when it's in the add-on.
So I'm wondering how others library that provides API stability guarantee would treat the API in the dependencies like standard library. Like will they say that the standard libraries API guarantee will also be part of their libraries API guarantees? Like how do they handle this condition?
Yeah, I think hey, we're going to build a single binary to run across all Linuxes is not like rel doesn't do that. For example, rel will build a separate binary for each CentOS version, or not CentOS version, but like
Yeah.
each rel version. So like for rel 7, rel 8, there'll be a different RPM that's built on that with the right tool chains. And so if you use the distro provided versions of things, that's the most common. And I think similarly for Ubuntu and other distributions, they probably do that. And I don't know how many projects actually say like, here's a binary which is meant to go across all of the distros. I mean, there's already like, we don't say that you can write one add-on and it will run on Windows and Linux and Mac, right? So you already have to build a couple. To date, the Linux flavors have worked. And I think this might be like an edge case where like, I'm hoping it's just an edge case where it's regex and there's something unintended that happened that causes the problem, right? So it's not going to be a widespread thing. But you could see like, well, okay, no, like really Linuxes with different glibcs, like you can't always use a later one. I think that's intended that you can. Like if I've compiled against glib 2.7, I can use it on 2.2.8. I think that's intended to be, but like there might be bugs that prevent that, and like, in which case there may be nothing we can do, right? And like in that case, it's like, okay, well, you're maybe going to have to build another version for Linux, like two versions for Linux, and use the right one.
So yeah, I think in other words, like if it's not Node.js, if it's a plain C++ application that try to load a dynamic library, and
Yeah.
that dynamic library also uses regex, and I think that will also cause a problem. If it's so, I think it's a standard library issue instead of Node.js issue.
Yeah, I totally agree that that's most likely the case. I just might spend a little bit more time because like if we could say if it is like, hey, because somehow like having exposed the symbols in Node means that it picks up the wrong versions or whatever, that's something we might be able to change. If it's just that if we use it in Node and we use it in the other one, then like, yeah, it's like it may be that the suggestion might be we'll just update to CentOS 8 and we'll like that's required for all new versions of Node, and you're just gonna have to do that. So.
Yeah.
But it was interesting in that it wasn't like originally I kind of thought it might have just been a glibc thing, but it seems unfortunately it's a little more complicated than that. So like statically linking didn't solve the problem. So
Yeah, that's weird. I would assume that they use some global space to save something.
yeah, and like it's not impossible that like there's some actually right, yeah, like it's not impossible that there's something else that like with the code and the way it's used or something, but it's not obvious to me. Like I looked at some other examples and they look pretty consistent, but and it was like it's not strictly an initialization thing because like in this code where I moved the actual creation of the regex, I could see that the crash happened later on, right? Like with the default code with it being out here, it was basically just under DL open, Node API code, the initialization hadn't run, whereas if I moved it into the init, all worked, and then it actually crashed during the init call itself.
Well, they should go away if we remove the global, if we remove the static universal pattern, like moving it to a function scope.
Well, I moved it into this initialization scope and it didn't go away.
But we have a variable outside the function scope, right?
Right, but it crashed in this init. Right? Like it didn't
Yeah.
like it didn't get this is just a whereas when it was so it seemed to be like it was actually in this the part where you create the regex, not just creating a regex.
I see. Yeah, that's weird.
So that's where I was like, okay, well this really has like doesn't have to do with the fact that it's being done in initialization or it's being done like unless like we could still do it in a method but not in the init. But I don't think that's the case from my guess. But I'll hopefully spend a little bit more time looking at it. But I think it's kind of interesting so far.
Yeah, thank you for looking into it.
Yeah, and if you have any like, hey, wait a sec, this could cause that thoughts after the fact, just add them into the issue.
Yeah.
Otherwise, let's see if there's any other updates on other things in here. I think this one, the test failures on AX, I know Abdir from the team had submitted a PR to the related NPM package. I think they told him though that they'd actually fixed it another way by forcing WASM targets so that it would be in WASM and it could run across them. So that seems to be progressing and should be fixed at some point. I don't think we have any updates on any of the others then. So the to-dos, I don't think there's any updates. And then,
I have a open pull request in Node.js API
yep,
to allow the native class to inherit from a JavaScript class. I originally thought that it should be not possible because V8 function template does not allow us to do so. But I realized that we do not use the V8 API object type in the Node API. We use a V8 private to save the native pointer. So it should be safe for us to use the JavaScript check return overriding so that it's possible to override the value of a constructor can return. So we can return a event target chat object from the native constructor. And I also find out that there is a limit in the current Node.js core that might cause a issue with the current return overriding because would you mind navigate to the discussion tab?
discussion, yeah.
Yeah, conversations, yeah. And I linked in the command that we specified the last comment. Yeah, we specified a lead signature parameter when we creating the function template or a instance method. So this lead signature disallows the instance method being called on a JavaScript receiver that are not created from the function template. So this is a V8 feature. And we don't need this in Node API, but I would assume that some people might rely on the behavior, so we cannot just remove it. But this disallows us, this blocks us from adding the ability in the Node add-on API. So I think an option could be that adding a new API property descriptor to remove this behavior because users could already do the via signature branch checking thing in Node API, like what I did in the test in this progress. So if you could navigate to the code part. Yeah, fast change. And in the binding.cc,
Sorry.
yeah, binding.cc, there's a, sorry, no, it's in the object wrap constructor trait tag.cc. Yeah,
Okay,
the
yep,
function is test override is a unique feature that's only available in native that we can branch check a object to see if it's a real native class instance. So it cannot be forged in pure JavaScript. So if we call this is test override function with a JavaScript object created with the prototype changed to the test override class, it will not work. It will only work with the real object that's created with the test override constructor. So this is the branch check that we support in Node add-on API and in V8 function template native class. And the functionality of the node add-on API bound check, which is the unwrap functionality, does not rely on weird function template. So we can do safely. We can safely remove the weird signature, but it's just that every method will have to manually check the brand, like what we did in here, like unwrap. So it's just that it might be more work to do in user code. So I'm still thinking that if we can improve this, because the original issue was opened by the web GPU, node add-on, and I think this add-on is kind of unique because this brand checking feature is widely presenting in the web specification. So if we want to implement some API that's being specified in the HTML spec or W3C specifications, we will have to implement such brand checking thing. So the inability to do so in Node add-on API might limit the use case of Node API that we cannot do something web specification requires. So I think that might be a good case that we might need to improve in Node API.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to spend a little bit more time reading what you've got. But
Yeah,
it sounds like we
I
have,
think
like you're saying, if there's an artificial limitation that, but there's some performance aspects as well, right? Like,
it's not an artificial limitation. It was, well, it, it's kind of it's kind of complex when we involve in this brand checking thing because it's kind of unique to web APIs and for correctness check. So it was implemented in V8 to make the web API implementation more easier, but this opens up the question that how do we support this in general? So yeah, it will definitely need more time to consume this because we don't do this in pure JavaScript code because we don't have like brand checking in JavaScript code. Until recently, we have the private field, like the hash field in JavaScript. That's kind of similar thing to brand checking. So that's kind of new. And the question is, how do we support this in Node add-on, Node API?
okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'll try and take a look around. Be good. That was this one, right?
Yeah,
Is that the only new one in here, or?
I don't think there are anything new.
Or if there's any others, or should we chat about any of these other ones?
There's a Node API deadlock fix, but I'm not sure I understand it correctly. So yeah, I'm still waiting for the author to have a test for this.
Okay. Okay, well, if that's all the ones we should discuss for this week, I guess we'll see everybody in GitHub in next week.
Yeah, thank you. See you
Okay,
later.
thank you. See
Cool.
everybody later.